Hello, this will be a continuation of our Weather API project, and I'm going to open our project up here in Visual Studio Code. And where we left off, we had set up our getWeather method to work with the async and await keywords. And the project right here now doesn't really look like it does a whole lot. So if I open it in Safari, you can see it just gets the temperature as Kelvin, right? So that's kind of a little weird. We could fix that. And then it just doesn't look that great. Plus, it always gets the temperature from the same zip code, right? We'd like to put another zip code in there, right? So let's work on the appearance here for a little bit. So I'm going to go into my HTML file, and I'll call this like weather app. And let's add a style sheet. So I'm up in the head of the document, and I'm going to add the style tag, and then we'll style it. So far, I just have this H1 right here, and that's pretty much all of my, my document. That's like the whole thing. So I'm going to put scripts here at the bottom, and then everything above here is my document. So I think I'll add a div, let's call it class container, and I'm going to move this H1 inside here, and we'll display the temperature there, and maybe underneath this we'll add a form, and we'll let people input their zip code. So I'll give this an ID of form, super creative name, and then I'll add an input, and we'll set this to type. It's going to be a zip code, so I'll say type number, I guess, is good. And then I'll set a placeholder, and we'll say enter zip. And this line's getting pretty long, so I think I can move these like that, and that'll kind of read a little better. Okay, and we'll leave that as alone for now. Leave it as is, and then I'm going to add a button. We'll give it type submit, and I'll say let's call it search, right? And there we go. There's our you can type your zip code in here, 94010, and you can search, right? Right now you can see if I search, it starts to reload the page, right? So it's not really getting the weather from the zip code you typed here. It's really just refreshing the page, and then that automatically triggers it to load the zip here. So let's fix that. So let's talk about the code here. The code that's in Weather API JS is our API code, or our our library code. So people would import this and use it. The code here is our developer code. So as a developer, I might use a library, but then I'll add my own code to to use the library in my way, right? And to do the things that I need to do. So this handling this form right here is kind of developer code. It's not going to go in this library because not every app is going to be set up the way ours is set up, right? So let's get the form first. So I'm going to say const, how about, let's call it search form. Actually, we'll just call it form. I know it's kind of a little too generic, but I think that's okay. And we'll just do get element by ID form. There, okay. So I've got my form here, and then let's handle our form. So I'll put that down here, and I'll say form dot, actually let's do form add event listener, and the event we're listening for is a submit event. And actually maybe we'll use an arrow function here, and we'll just type the whole function syntax there, and we'll put a variable here for the event object. And inside here, I'm going to get the event object and say prevent default. and that will prevent the form from refreshing the page. So if I just leave it like it is now, you can see that if I search, the little blue line runs across there and the browser refreshes, right? If I refresh here and then I click search now, you'll see that's not happening anymore, right? Because we're preventing the default behavior. So now clicking the button won't like tell the browser to run the form action and refresh. Instead, we'll handle we'll handle how the data is fetched, right? We'll do that all with JavaScript. So we need to get the value here from this input field. Let's give it an ID name. Now you could get it with a tricky selector, but there's only one of these things. So like if there's a single item, assigning an ID to it is kind of convenient, right? So let's give it an ID. Let's call it input dash zip, right? And then down here, I'll say, actually we can just put it up at the top here. Let's do const input zip equals document dot get element by ID input zip, and then over here I'll say, you know, how about constant zip code equals input zip dot value. Okay, and that should give us the value that was entered into the field. And now we can call this getWeather method and we can include our zip code. I'm going to get rid of this variable because we'll now have it here. And this API key right here, I think I'm going to cut that and put it inside here. And then I'll cut all of this getWeather stuff and paste it within my my handler, right? And we could write another function and call it from this event listener, which would be kind of nice. But I think as it is, this will be good because we don't have a lot of code here. So what's going to happen? We're going to get the API key, we're going to get the zip value from the input, and then we're going to pass those in here and then return it and display the weather data. So let's refresh it here. Oh, it doesn't get the weather immediately. Let's get the weather for 94010, and it says 286. What if we got the weather for I don't know any other zip codes. Let's 1 2 3 4 5. I think that's actually a valid zip code. So it kind of worked, right? Let's do 100. I think that's a zip too. Yeah. So so it seems to be working. So that's pretty good. Let's add a style sheet now. Okay, so this is kind of working, but you know, it just doesn't look very appealing here. So let's add some styles. So first of all, we need some fonts. So I'm gonna say body. Actually, you know, before we even do the fonts, I'm gonna expand the body and HTML tags to fill the page. Normally the body collapses vertically, so it's just as tall as the content, but I want to place all this stuff in the center. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some styles up here in the style tag. And I'll take the body and HTML elements and say you guys are all going to have a height of 100%. Okay? And then I'll go to the body tag and I'll say you're going to have a font family of, let's do the default system font sans serif. So I chose this option here. It's kind of weird. You can put anything you want here, but this is the default system sans serif font. So this will modify itself depending on whether you're on the desktop or on mobile, and it'll choose the font based on which version of the system you have, right? And there's a little chart that'll say what, you know, Dash Apple system and Blink Mac system font is on iOS versus on Android versus on the desktop, OS 10 version, whatever, right? You know, and then if you're not on a Mac system, it uses these fonts for Android. So anyway, so we'll save that, and if I refresh here, you can see now everything's kind of a nice sans serif. I think that's Helvetica New or whatever, right? So that's pretty good. And then we can set the default font size. I kind of like big fonts, so I'm going to do font size. The default is 16, but I think I'm going to do 20 pixels. We'll do like a giant font. You know, everybody's a little bit bigger. And then let's do line height of, oops, not line break. Let's do line height of 1.5 is a good starting place. Got a little bit more space there. And then let's style the so that our content here is in the center of the page. I'm going to close that up. Make this like a little bit more narrow here so we can kind of see whether it's in the middle or not. I have a div here called container, and so it's the child of the body tag. So if I take the body and I say you are display flex, and then I say, you know, and that'll arrange it horizontally, right? But by default, right? So it'll be justify content center. So that should put everybody in the in the middle horizontally, right? But now I want to align them vertically. So to align them vertically, I'll do align items center. Okay, and by default the flex direction is row, so justify content applies to the main axis, which is across when you're row, and then align items will apply to the cross axis, which will be the vertical axis when the main axis is row, right? So so there we go. So now we're kind of in the middle. It's not exactly in the middle because this has some margin at the top, so let's get rid of that. Let's style, remember that's our H1, so let's say H1. Let's do a margin. Let's do margin of 0 on the top, 0 on the right, 1 rem at the bottom. So a rem is a root M, and that should be our base font size of 20. So that'll be our 20 pixels margin at the bottom, and then we'll do 0 on the left side. So so that's kind of a little nicer, right? A little closer. And then maybe, what else here? Maybe we should also style that input. So I'll say input, you are going to have a, let's actually set the font size on this. I think the font size on those is a little smaller than 1M. So I'm going to say you are going to be 1, let's make it 1 rem. So that's a little bigger, kind of nicer to read. Actually, you know, that button should be the same font size too. So let's style that too. Right, there we go. That's kind of looking a little better. And then what else do we do with our buttons? Let's say, let's give both these guys padding of 0.5 rems. So that doesn't look too bad. Let's do margin of 0. I think these have like a tiny bit of margin on them. There's still kind of a gap there. So that looks pretty good. Let's, I guess we're going to have to break out some styles for each one. So let's do input. You're going to be border of 1 pixel solid. So that doesn't look too bad. And then I want to put a rounded corner here and here. So we'll say border radius, what is this one? End. I've never heard end radius. I don't even know what that is. What I want those, I want the top left, and then I want to set it to, let's do 0.5 rem. Right, so we got a round one here, and then I want to do the same thing on the border radius bottom left. oh, there we go, bottom left radius. So we'll do 0.5 rems. And so that looks okay. Let's do the same thing on this button here. So we'll give that button, we'll say button, you are border, let's say 1 pixel solid. We'll change the color later maybe. And then we'll do border right, top right radius of 0.5 rems, and border bottom right radius of, wow, those code hints really help, 0.5 rems. Oh, okay, so that's not looking too bad. We got this little gap right there. I don't know where that's coming from. Probably some extra margin or something we got to get rid of. But anyway, that's looking a lot better. Maybe we'll just hold on that, and let's add one more thing. So I like that we got the temperature here. Now you can type in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then get the temp. But one, I'd like to get this to be units imperial, which is like, Fahrenheit, or units Celsius. And then underneath it, I'd like to get a description of the weather to say what it is. And we'll need to make an element for that, right? So if I look in my code here, you can see this is my container, this is the form here, and this is the temperature, right? So we're getting a temp here, and then underneath it, maybe I want to add a, let's use a small tag. We'll call this like small print, right? So I'll say small tag here, and maybe I'll just put a comment in there, weather description, like this. And then we'll give this an ID here. We'll just call it weather description, right? I'll just shorten that. And yeah, let's see if we can get the description. So our weather here, we've got the temp display, and then underneath it, let's go back to our script tag here, and we'll say constant weather description equals document.get element by ID, and we'll paste in weather description there. And I think that's looking pretty good. So now here we've got main.temp, but now we got to get the description. So let's figure out where that is. So I'm going to console log the weather data, right? Remember, we looked at it before. I'll get the console here and show what we have here. So here we can see just the body element. But what I want to see is I want to see what was returned in this JSON object. And so I'll put JSON here, and then I'll get the, let's figure out where this is from, right? So there's my JSON data. And let's make that a little bit bigger. And you can see we get main temp. So if I go here and I go to main, there's temp, right? Oh, this is Schenectady, right? Oh, funny. I guess it's New York. All the New York zip codes all begin 1, right? So anyway, so this is, at least I think it's New York. I don't know. Anyway, so here's our temperature. Now we need to find the description, right? So if I look in here, is it in main? Nope. Let's see. It's in, maybe it's under weather. So this is a little weird. This weather starts off as an array, and then there's an object inside. It's an array with one element, and then there's an object in here with a bunch of properties. Oh, and it's got description. So that's a little weird. Let's say, let's try it here. So what we want to do is we want to say weather description dot, inner HTML equals JSON dot weather. So that gets us to here. And then this is an array, and I want to get the first item. So I'll put the square brackets with a 0. And then that should give me this object, because it's the first item in the array. And then it has a dot description property. So I'll say dot description. Okay, so we'll save that, and then we'll try it again. Oh, overcast clouds, not bad. Oh, we'll have to work on some margin here. This is like too much margin and not enough here, right? So we'll fix that later, but this seems to be working. What else do we need here? I think that's pretty good. Why don't we hold on this video here? This went on kind of a long time. So that got us started kind of modifying our developer code just using the library without any changes to the library, right? So we'll move on from here and we'll add some more features in the next session.